This Globing video is brought to you by Global PEO Services. GPS helps companies hire employees fast without having to set up legal entities in foreign countries. With GPS, you can hire employees in days without having to deal with HR, benefits, payroll, tax, or accounting issues. Go to globalpeoservices.com or your globig.co marketplace to learn more. Welcome to Globig. Today we're talking about relocating employees into the UK. Our focus is on digital natives. Globig.co is your online international expansion headquarters. We help thousands of companies just like yours succeed abroad. And the way we do that is we provide you with a blueprint so that you have a plan for success. And then we make it easy to hire, track, and pay the very best services around the world right inside of the Globig dashboard, all from one location. You can do everything from set up your business to draw up employment contracts to hire accounting support, global payroll specialists, relocation experts, sales and marketing support. You can even do background checks. So our focus today is on that very, very first person that's relocating, which is often a salesperson, some sort of a community evangelist. Typically, they're digital natives, so young, single, and healthy. So they're the easiest type of a person to relocate. And we're going to focus on that for companies that haven't really done this before. And then we'll also share in a later episode how to do this with the most difficult groups to relocate. And those are families that are with school-age children and pets and having all sorts of other needs. Things to consider for the UK. Now, keep in mind that this is a really high-level overview. You'll want to obviously consider the individual's needs as well as where they're locating, because London's going to be completely different than Edinburgh or Manchester or anywhere else. So, we'll want to look at this this is a generalization, but it's very helpful. The most important thing to realize is that there is no at-will employment in the UK. Employment law applies to the person relocating no matter where you're sending them from immediately. So as soon as they're in the UK employment law will apply, and this includes things such as needing an employment agreement. Well, that's not always the case from wherever they're coming from, but it is the case in the UK. They have UK holidays, and you'll want to make sure that you're aware of what those are. There's very specific requirements around benefits, and terminations are much, much different, and we need to follow those. So firstly, do have someone that is an expert with UK employment law draw up that employment contract as well as a relocation agreement so that everyone is really clear on what the expectations are, how long everything is expected, and just be prepared for this entire process. The second thing is to make sure that you have the visas that you need, and do that in advance. And don't make your employee do this. Do this as a company so that their entire focus is really on getting there, setting up, becoming a local, and succeeding in the job that you've assigned them, instead of focusing on trying to get all the pieces put in place, which I've seen lots and lots of companies try to do. It's distracting, and it can take months and months where you really just want them executing. And the reason I want you to get the visa situation set up, yes, you could go over briefly on some sort of a tourist visa, but there are specific types of visas that you can't get once you're in the country. You need to do them in advance, and you will want some advice on whether you qualify for a Tier 1 visa or a Tier 2 visa or a company representative visa. So all of those are very different, and you're going to want to have someone that's an expert, whether it's a law firm or a relocation expert, helping you with this. The next tip that I have is a really important one, and this one is really surprising to many, but the most difficult thing and the slowest thing when moving or relocating someone to the UK is going to be setting up your bank account. It is for most. And the reason for that is you need to set up for both the individual, so they need their personal information and their personal banking set up so that they can access things such as renting an apartment or setting up electricity and other services such as those. And from a company's perspective, you need to be able to pay vendors and you need to be able to do business in that country. And because you and your person relocating, employee relocating, you have no track record there, you have no credit there, and there are very, very strict money laundering regulations in the UK. This is a lengthy process because they do their due diligence and their homework on you, and it takes time. It's one of the reasons that many companies choose to work with a firm that does international employing for you. They're called global employment contractors or employers of record. It's basically a way of very, very quickly hiring someone, and it's typically that one or two folks that are just there because you don't plan on building an entire office. And it's a really great either short-term strategy, or if you're not ever planning on having a full office there or really being a corporation in that country, it's a nice way of getting your employees paid because they end up hiring your employees. These things are available in many countries, this process of hiring. It's fast, it doesn't require you to set up a business entity, and you can get your employees paid, and they usually will help your employee or the company set up some sort of a banking program fairly quickly. So it's something to consider, and we have some excellent partners in Globig that you can hire, so we'll want you to take a look at that. Make sure, if you're not going that route, make sure that you have a way to pay your employee in the UK without delays. So again, you're going to need to set up the banking, you're going to need to set up a process of payment, and since the banking process takes time, do that, I would say 3, maybe 6 months in advance of sending someone. I know that's not always realistic, but that's certainly optimal. Another thing to consider is taxes. Again, you're going to need some advice in how to set everything up correctly so that both for the company, there's not tax risk by having an employee there and them actually maybe selling, which could create tax risk. All of those things you want to consider from an employer perspective, from your company perspective, as well as for the employee. You don't want your employee having to pay taxes in both the UK as well as where they're coming from, their headquarters. So set it up correctly in advance so that everything is really clear and you're really taking care of both your employee as well as your company. The next tip that I have is understanding whether your employee is going to have access to the national health insurance, or if there are alternatives that you need to provide for or supplementary issues. If your employee is taking medications and regular medications that are really, really important for them, take a look to make sure that those medications are even available in different countries. That's not always the case. We have found employees that have transferred and then they couldn't actually get the medication that they needed and they had to come back. So just kind of go through that, make sure those things are taken care of in advance. If it's not something you have to consider, then that's great. But, again, just prepare. Another thing to consider is if you're providing travel expenses, both for the relocation as well as what the expectations are once they're in the country. Document all of this, especially for the relocation, so that there's no confusion between what is expected, what the employee was thinking you were going to pay for as a company, and then what you actually are going to be paying for. Relocations aren't always that inexpensive. Now, granted, if they're digital natives, maybe they just have a suitcase and a couple of boxes. That's great, very simple, very clean, and you understand what is going to be transferred. But if there's a little bit more, like maybe they have an apartment and their furniture that they're transferring and that needs to be packed up and shipped over and then stored for a while and then moved into the ultimate location, having in advance, having a conversation around that, an agreement around that, and documentation around that will probably eliminate all sorts of hurt feelings and disagreements at some point. Another thing to consider is when they are relocating, are you going to provide some sort of temporary or long-term housing? And, again, decide for how long and what level. If they're relocating into London, the chances of this being much more expensive than what you had anticipated is pretty likely. And again, your employee needs to be happy and feeling like they're taken care of. Otherwise, there's a lot of, if they're a really great employee and they're really skilled, other companies are going to be just as excited about having them work for them as you were. So, you don't really want to have that risk. Compensation is another one that we want to talk about. If you are relocating into a much more expensive area, such as London, you want to equalize compensation and make sure, again, that your employee can thrive. The last thing you want to do is make them uncomfortable and unable to do their job because they're focused on just surviving. And again, they'll most likely then be poached and looked for by someone else and hired by someone else because they're just a great opportunity for them as well. Will you be setting up an office? Are you going to be using co-working space, or will you be having your employee work from home? There are expenses associated with all of those, and those need to be taken care of by the company, and you'll want to have a clear understanding as to the right approach. Often, employees that are just going to set up will be working from some sort of a co-working environment. We do highly recommend that for several reasons. One, it's easy to set up and they're usually affordable, but they're also great landing places, right? You meet people, you all of a sudden have some sort of a built-in ecosystem of other support, and it's a really great way of getting to know others that can open doors for you, so the sales process is a little bit easier. Those are just some of my high-level tips that I recommend to you to think about, to have a plan around, and to consider when you're relocating. Really the easiest type of person, that salesperson, that digital native, that evangelist. We're going to take you through some of the more challenging relocations, and those are families with school-age children and pets and maybe nannies and relatives that are also going to be moving. So don't forget to join globig.co. We're your international expansion headquarters. There's lots of free resources and training, fantastic information, and it's the best way to build your team and to manage all of your internationalization needs. Go global, go big with Globig. Thank you.